Welcome to Disrupted Science, the occasional conversation between the authors of the upcoming book, How the Internet Disrupted Science. I'm Kent Anderson here with my co-author, Joy Moore, and we're recording this on Friday, September 26th, 2025. Hey, Joy.
Hey, Kent, how you
What
doing?
was what's the dramatic pause for? Seeing who's paying attention.
Just keeping you on your toes on this
Uh,
Friday. Yeah.
that's fair point. All right, so we just wrapped up a great conversation with Christine Laine, the editor in chief of the Annals of Internal Medicine, and we've both known her off and on for a fairly long time, and she's
Mhm.
still absolute star. So
Yeah. It was a great conversation that we're so happy to be able to share with you all. We touched on a lot of things, and to be able to talk to somebody who has um, is right at the forefront of helping America's physicians and their information needs and their educational needs at this point in time was really special. So,
yeah, and we also talk a little bit about the whole Tylenol RFK Jr. MAHA thing, and there's some really insights in here because one of the things that really separates Annals and some of the other top tier journals that the MAHA people don't like so much is that they have full time expert staff who really are connected to the community, know what they're
mhm,
doing, and and call balls and strikes. And so I think
mhm,
that some of the things that Christine shares later in the interview are really important insights into layers that we didn't know about to some of the research that was used to justify the Tylenol autism link that was just put out, and just again a reflection on how careful we need to be with science and with who says that they are producing it.
mhm. That's right.
So without further ado, we're going to get into our discussion with Christine Laine, and we also will have discoveries of the week, which include some from her. So away we go.
We're so happy to welcome Christine Laine to talk with us today. Christine is a physician with specialties in general internal medicine and clinical epidemiology. She's a professor at Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia. She is a member of the National Academy of Medicine. She has a master's of public health, and she is also probably most famous for being the editor in chief of the Annals of Internal Medicine. We are so grateful that she took some time out of her busy schedule to talk with us today. Welcome, Christine.
Welcome, Joy and Kent, and I'm so grateful that you wanted to talk with me.
Well, there's a lot to talk about in medical publishing, in public health, and we wanted to know what it's like to be you these days. So before we get into that, let's give a little background, okay? So you're the editor in chief of Annals, which is the official publication of the American College of Physicians. And for those who aren't familiar, can you give us a background on the ACP?
The American College of Physicians is a professional organization for internal medicine specialists and subspecialists. So subspecialists like cardiologists and gastroenterologists, et cetera, as well as general people who practice general internal medicine. It's the second largest physician organization in the US and the largest physician specialty organization in the US. It has about 165,000 members that are they're members from all over the world, but mostly North America. And its main goal, it is not an accrediting organization or a licensing or a certifying organization. It's mainly an organization that focuses on education and advocacy, with the advocacy really focused on helping things that make us help take care of our patients better.
Mm-hmm. So it's a very practical organization in terms of mission to help doctors become better doctors, throughout their careers, and the ongoing education and the things that you need to know and to stay up on to do your job.
Yeah, I think
right?
that sums it up pretty well.
Yeah. So where does the journal fit in? What do you publish?
Yeah, so the journal is published and owned by the American College of Physicians, and we are authors come from all over the globe. Last year, I think 47% of the papers that were submitted to us had a corresponding author that was outside of the U.S. So we really get our authors come from around the globe. While our core readership are the members of the American College of Physicians, there are many more physicians, non-physician clinicians, researchers, policymakers, and educators, and the public that read the journal through institutional subscription site licenses. A fair amount of our content is publicly accessible on our website. So our readership is much broader than the internal medicine audience that are members of the ACP, but generally our focus is on things that are going to help, our core audience practice. So how do we do that? I mean, we publish original research articles, we publish systematic review articles, clinical guidelines, commentary, personal essays, all towards, I think the ultimate goal is to make physicians better informed members of the medical community, so ultimately we can help our patients. We also publish a fair amount. We're known for having a very robust team of methodologists among our editorial group. So we do publish research and reporting methods articles that are trying to both help scientists do better research and also help the medical community be better consumers of that research.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you're also very selective, right? I mean, your acceptance rate is under 10%.
Under 5% last year.
Oh, wow, now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have you seen submissions going up? I'm just curious. I'm going to get into, I love journal stories. So
yeah, so our submissions, since in the time that I've been the editor, our submissions climb each year. During the pandemic, they almost tripled. It was crazy how many submissions we had. And since then, it's come down to a higher than the pre-pandemic level, but certainly, came down from the huge amount of submissions that were coming in during the pandemic. There's been a increase, I would say, over the last decade in the submissions that have a corresponding author from outside of the US, from like about 30% range to now, last year it was 47%. So, we're not, we get plenty of submissions, but I think like my peers at our peer journals, we always wish that we would get better submissions, but we do only publish about 5% of the things that come over the transom. So people who get rejection letters from my colleagues and I they shouldn't feel bad. They're in good company.
And then just to put the rejection rate into context, how many original research papers do you publish per year?
So that's a good question. And I should know the answer to.
Well, you publish a handful,
Yeah, I think we publish about 120 research papers each year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's a tiny, tiny fraction. And the reason your acceptance rate is only 5% is that you've got your team who are really going through to handpick, craft, work with the authors a bit in order to select the appropriate material for your readers, right?
And I think that the difference, you said work with the authors a bit. I think we work with the authors a lot. And I think that's one of the things that distinguishes journals like Annals, New England Journal, JAMA, BMJ, Lancet, that have full-time dedicated editor staff. What it does is it gives us the bandwidth when we see a submission that we think the data are good, but it needs some work. We can really work with the authors to make it as good as it can be before, and as interpretable as it can be before we move it out into the world. Journals that have, volunteer editors, not a lot of editorial staff, not methodologists that are paid to help us do our work, don't have that luxury of really going back and forth with authors. So one thing that I'm really proud that we do is every research paper that we provisionally accept, which means the authors get reviews and letters and say, if you do these things, we'll publish this article. We offer the authors the opportunity to have their team meet with the physician editor and the methods editor via Zoom to talk about what we're asking them to do. And I think that, we offer it to everybody. We're not overwhelmed with requests, but I think that even the people that don't choose that option, I think it creates a lot of goodwill among authors. And when we do have those conversations, I think it avoids the need to go back and forth. It avoids an adversary relationship between the editors and the authors, because we can really, explain while we're looking at people on the screen why we're asking for the things that we're asking for. And sometimes the authors can convince us why what we're asking for might not be right, and we come to an agreement. And I think that I do not know of another journal, at least clinical medical journal, that that offers that interaction with authors.
That's amazing. So you know the authors of every paper that you publish. You know something about them, or
Right. I mean, we've interacted a fair amount either through written correspondence or these Zoom conferences that we have with authors.
Yeah, I think a lot of the top specialty journals do this in a smaller scale, but they do it as well. And I know the editors of some of those are equally sort of, they don't like how peer review is, portrayed as an adversarial, systematized approach. They are they're very proud of the fact that it's humans talking with humans and working out, what's the epistemic issue here? What's the data issue here? How are we explaining this? That's not clear. How do we get this, really important finding ship shape for a readership that we know well? And and so I think that, it's a theme that needs to be teased out more, that there are really hardworking, smart humans kind of working at certain critical junctures together.
Yeah, and I think that does characterize some of the specialty journals. I just think that those journals, full disclosure, my husband is the editor of one of those subspecialty journals. They do not have full-time, editorial staff. They're almost volunteer staff, but they try to do the same things. They just don't have the luxury of the same bandwidth.
Yep, true.
Their editors have more time-consuming day jobs. But I think one analogy that I make a lot, the difference between a subscriber-pays journal and a open access or author funder-pays journal, I always use the analogy of an art museum. I like art museums, but I think that the journals like Annals that are where the subscriber pays, we pay a lot of attention to the delivery, the juxtaposition, the selection of what we publish, the sequence that we publish it in, the material that is next to it, which is similar to a curated show in an art gallery. I think that the author funder pays journals don't pay a lot of attention to the readers. They pay more attention to the authors. Not to say that subscription journals, we have to pay a lot of attention to the authors because we don't have submissions, we don't have a journal. But I think more the author pays journals, the material is there. It's like the storeroom in a museum. It's there. If somebody wants to go find it, they can find it, but there's not a lot of attention paid to pushing it out to a desired, the desired audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a perfect analogy. The craft that goes into what you do is intentional, and the packaging, the display, makes a difference for the people who are consuming the content.
Yeah, and we do, that's the people that pay for the journal, and also we do pay a lot of attention to every article that we publish. We try to think of key opinion leaders in that area who may or may not subscribe to the journal via membership in the ACP or through their institution, but we push toll-free links of those articles to those key opinion leaders who are the people that we think should know about this work that we're publishing. So a lot of effort goes into, we don't just it doesn't stop when we publish. A lot of effort goes into pushing things out. And I think also goes into thinking about stuff we've published in the past that we should push out now. So yesterday, I was reading a New York Times article about there's a case of chikungunya on Long Island. And not in a person who, there's no evidence that this was travel related. The person who has the infection did not travel anywhere and was not exposed to people who had traveled to places where you'd normally see this virus. So it made me think, back in 2015, we published an article when there was a chikungunya outbreak in the places where it normally occurs, where the authors were talking about how with climate change and travel, this was likely going to appear. So this is an opportunity where I'm talking to our communications people and saying we should probably resurface this article on social media to show that the person who wrote this was, well, he was probably correct.
Right. Yep.
So there's I think there's a shelf life to what we publish, and sometimes it's good when that shelf life is long.
Yeah, I mean, if there's solid scientific findings and all of a sudden they prove relevant again, it just proves the value of carefully bringing information forward and putting it into the scientific record to be retrieved when you need it, right?
Yep.
Yep.
So that's really around the crafting of the journal for your community. What we've seen, and in the time that you and Kent and I have been in this business, there's I don't even know how many times more journals, medical journals, or journals that are publishing clinically relevant research. It's just exploded beyond the ability to even count it, and because everything is networked and platformed and indexed, and so we see now more and more in the public sphere, public access to these papers that are coming from all these different sources, all these different journals. And then, especially in the last few months, a big attack on medical journals specifically. And so
Right.
I wanted
you nasty elite medical journals.
You nasty elite medical journals, where at the same time there's unlimited amount of papers available to anyone who wants to get them. So I wanted to ask you just to for a minute, can you explain the purpose of medical journals, like where they came from and what they're for?
Yeah.
And how, if you think the landscape has changed?
Yeah, it certainly has changed. I mean, there's a proliferation of journals, some of them legitimate and a lot of them predatory, but they look legitimate. Scary thing happened this week. We got a communication from an author in Pakistan that had a copy of an acceptance letter from the Annals of Internal Medicine, and
Oh,
this
no.
person was inquiring when we were going to publish it. The letter had my email address on it and a signature that was not my signature. It used the Annals logo, and I had to tell this person, we have no record of, you were duped. We did not accept your manuscript, and asked this person that if the person had any information about the communication of where it came from, to send it to us, and we could try to figure out, what this entity was. So sidetracked a little bit, but there's a proliferation both of legitimate journals and illegitimate journals, and anybody can get anything published. And if you can't get it published, you can put it on a preprint server and it's out there for the world to see. So I think traditionally medical journals, I think they came up to be a place where researchers and clinicians could publish material that would help physicians keep up to date and with their knowledge, because medical knowledge evolves very rapidly. I think they were also a venue for discourse about timely issues, discourse and debate about timely issues. And I think that was the role of medical journals for a long time. And that was the main, there were also professional meetings where those things could happen. I think now there are so many other places that physicians can go to try to keep up to date, including UpToDate, Dynamedics, Google, and so the places that people can go for that information have expanded. Now, if that information is coming from medical journals that have reviewed and filtered the work, then the journals are still playing into that. And the other thing is, as far as the platform for discourse about controversial and timely issues, we have social media now. So you don't really need the journals to do that. And it's easier and faster for people who want to make their thoughts known to post it on social media than to submit an article, a commentary to the New England Journal or Annals, where they have a, 5% chance of it being accepted for publication.
Right.
So I think the role has really, it has really changed. And one of the things, in the conference room in the clinic where I work with the house staff at Jefferson, they used to have mailboxes. And it was sort of sad because these mailboxes would be filled with Annals Green and New England Journal Red stacks of journals. And I would tease the residents. I'd say, you can empty those out because they're making me feel really bad that nobody's looking at those anymore. And, part of that was because people are looking at the digital journals more, but I think a lot of it is people are, particularly earlier career physicians, are not looking at journals that much. They may be looking at excerpts from journals. They may be listening to podcasts. They may be reading news reports about what's in journals, but to go and really read the whole article, back in the day when people used to pull articles out and file them in a file cabinet so they could go to them, those days that's history.
I remember when I was a very young medical journals publisher, trying to keep up with the office routing memo on the copies of NEJM and Annals and JAMA, and you didn't want them to stack up on your desk, and you got to flip through and get it on to the next person.
I think now I always say that the likelihood that people are reading the print journal, it's related to the distance between where they pick up their mail and their kitchen counter.
Right. But there are still journal clubs in effect in a lot of the training situations, right?
Yes, and as a fact, Annals we just launched this past year, Annals Guide to Journal Club, where we take an article that we published in Annals and we provide materials that people who are doing journal clubs can pick from, so they don't have to do as much of the work. And there's a balance.
So you're like Oprah's book club for journal clubs. I like it.
And the goal is to talk not only about the clinical issues, but to give some insight into the critical appraisal of the work, so that people can be better consumers of the medical literature. The journal clubs are real, and that's still going on. So I think that journals do have a role, but they may be the basis for the information that people are looking at, but they're not looking at the journals themselves. They're looking at derivatives of the journals.
It's interesting to see if the tide's going to turn. I've heard a few things this past week, and one with our interview with Anita Chan, where people say the bad effects of a new thing introduced, a new innovation introduced, takes about 20 years to become obvious, so much so that people start really turning the corner on it. And it seems like we're getting there maybe with social media and pay to play publishing and things like that. And so you hear of educators turning back to blue books for exams, or turning back to hard copy markup and Socratic method. And journal clubs I think serious minded people are realizing that serious minded content is out there for them, and engaging with it is actually rewarding and informative and makes them smarter. So I wonder if we're kind of rounding some kind of corner here without realizing it.
Yeah, so when I first became the editor, I made the prediction that within 3 to 5 years, the Annals would not be a print journal anymore. We would be entirely digital. I've been wrong about a lot of things, including that. And it's interesting
and that was more than 5 years ago that you
that
made
was more
that
than
prediction.
5 years ago.
Right.
I don't want to say how many, but more than 5 years ago. And I think, when when the American College of Physicians had surveyed members about whether they want the print journal, people want both. And everybody said, oh, but that's because that's only the older members, not the early career people. It was identical in the early career people and the older people. And I think that's because people use the print journal differently. I think they use it to browse. They need something to read on the way from their mailbox to their kitchen counter. Or
they write on it, right?
It's sort of a reminder that information is there, which is very different than if somebody needs the answer to they have a patient, they need an answer to a clinical question, they're going to do a search and they're going to find, try to find information. So I think it's important, like they're very different uses to the print and the digital. I suspect the print will go away. I mean, we've done things like we've gone from 24 issues a year to 12 issues because of sustainability issues and climate change. It's better for the environment to deliver the print in larger boluses than smaller boluses. So we're not publishing less content, we're just delivering it different. We've ratcheted down the quality of the paper to more recyclable materials and things like that to try to address those things. But we really, when we survey the people who read the journal, they say they want both. And the other thing is that this is more anecdotal. We haven't done a survey of this, but researchers like to publish in a journal that has a tangible copy. And researchers who do not have their own subscription to the print annal often contact us and say, can I have a copy? I guess, their mother needs something to hang on the refrigerator. So I think that there is a sense of it being, there's some value in that tangible, article on paper.
Yeah, and I don't think that's going away. I interact with a lot of kids in another aspect of my life, and one time I brought in a print copy of a magazine on the topic, and they were going nuts for it. They thought the photography was so good, and it was so cool how it was laid out, and it was so fun to watch because tactile artifacts still impress people with tactile senses. So
yeah. And I know I do that. I've transitioned my reading of novels and stuff mostly to being read on my tablet because it's easier to buy books and all that. But I do find myself when there's a book that I really like that I've read on my tablet, I go and I buy a paper copy.
I do the same thing.
My wife bugs me about my bookshelves, and I said, that's just my mind turned inside out. So
Or I'll check one out from the library and halfway through want to scribble in the margins, and then I'll buy my own copy.
Yeah.
Well, there's different ways of getting your information depending on, the context of what you need it for. And and reading articles or having an article published in a journal that is part of a crafted package says one thing. And then going to do a search for something that you need to answer a question in the moment is different in the online universe of scientific papers has lots of opportunities for people to go online and find something that's going to answer a question or support a theory. So on that note, can we talk about this Tylenol paper? Did you get scooped?
If we must. I'd rather talk about that than the aluminum paper.
Right. Well, we'll get to that next, but I didn't. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to know if there's a paper that was published in the Biomed Central
Environmental Health.
Environmental Health, right? That has turned out to be just the thing for RFK Jr. and his friends to have the President of the United States to tell women not to take Tylenol. If this is a worthwhile endeavor, did you miss the scoop?
I think it's pretty clear why the authors chose to publish it in that journal. I think they were looking somewhere that would publish it quickly, wouldn't ask for a lot of pesky revisions, good for BMC Environmental Health. Their impact factor is going to go up based on this article. And it is curious, given the head of the NIH saying cracking down on article processing charges. I looked it up. The article processing charges in that journal are $3,490. So
wow.
on the higher, they're not insignificant. But I think that really they were looking, and the other thing, they use this method called the navigation method, which
what does that mean?
We publish a lot of systematic reviews, and yesterday during our methods conference with people who, that is the focus of what they do, systematic reviews and meta-analyses, I said, what is this method? And I was at the Guidelines International Network meeting last year. Nobody talked about the navigation method. They were talking about, other methods for doing systematic reviews. And apparently nobody had ever heard of it, but we did some digging, and it's sort of terminology that's used a lot in the environmental health literature. But we looked at that article, and we had concerns about it. The methods of how, particularly the methods of how they rated the quality of the included articles, were not something that we would have published in Annals. And what was particularly curious is the articles that our team thought were the strongest articles, they were rating as having a high risk of bias. And it really wasn't. I think that the best as we could tell, the high risk of bias was triggered by the fact that it didn't align with the conclusions that they wanted. So I think if that work had been submitted to Annals, we would have been interested in publishing it because it was trying to answer an important and timely question, but we would not have published it in anything close to the form that it was published in the BMC journal.
Right. Yeah, and you look at the timing, I think the paper was submitted in May and accepted in July and published in August. And that all fits within the window.
Just in time for September.
Just in time for September. Yeah. And it just all fits within the time frame of announcing they're going to, make a statement about the cause of autism, and them, saying that they have done so. So, yeah, I mean, the whole thing kind of.
Well, if Tylenol, I was kind of hoping if Tylenol was the cause of autism, they would lay off vaccines for a bit.
Right.
I don't think that's happening.
Well, the other aspect to that paper and I wanted to get your take on this. It was fully disclosed in the conflict of interest statement. So when you look at the paper, and and this has been a long standard practice for journals, is that there's a conflict of interest statement, and just because you have a conflict doesn't mean that the science isn't good. It just means you need to kind of give the
It's an
audience
additional source
that.
of potential bias that readers
Right.
didn't know about.
Right. And so this one was the strangest conflict of interest statement that I've ever read, because it calls out the fact that the senior author had been an expert witness in legal proceedings. But then the last sentence, and I didn't write it down, is like, but he promises that he has no bias on this paper. So take his word for it.
Even though the
so,
paper was based
it was
on
so weird. Yeah.
Yeah, even though the paper was based on arguments that he made as an expert witness that got thrown out of court.
Yeah.
Right.
But I wonder if you could explain from your vantage point as the editor-in-chief of a medical journal, just touch on a second about conflicts of interest statements and what their role is in papers.
I think their role is to identify potential source of bias. Annals is a member of the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, and we follow their conflict disclosure policy. The way that we do it is we have authors fill out the conflict disclosure form, and that form is published. What they've said is published. We don't reword it. We don't try to, we just think, this is what the authors told us. We are not asking for their tax records or anything to be able to verify it, but we want to be, very transparent. This is what they told us. If we find out that what they told us isn't true, we take action, take appropriate action. But I think it really is to identify a potential source of bias. Now, the way we think about it, we think about things like when there are conflicts in original research articles or systematic reviews where the methodology is laid out and that can be scrutinized, the conflicts will not usually say this is too high of a risk of bias, we're not going to publish this work because the methods are there. Where it's more significant and we work much harder to try to find people who do not have any potential conflicts of interest are in commentaries or narrative reviews, editorials, where the methodology and stuff is not as clearly laid out. There are some areas where it's really hard to find an editorialist who is knowledgeable about the topic and does not have some financial conflict of interest. We do also consider conflicts that are present in research funding from industry, different from when people are sort of consultants and hired guns, to speak on behalf of the company, again, because there's more clarity in sort of the methods that are being done. So we do, obviously having research funding is a potential conflict of interest, but we sort of judge it as being different than when you're on a speakers bureau or an ill-defined consultant.
Yeah, if you're an expert in an area of research, you need to get paid in order to do your work. And so a good source of funding are from the companies who have money to invest in you.
Or from a job at one of those companies, yeah.
And that's going to become increasingly important. I mean, one of the things I worry about a lot, a large majority of the research we publish is US government funded. I worry about that pipeline over the coming years. So maybe, and it may be that, industry will step up. It's not going to all be, all that research is not going to be funded by philanthropic efforts. So, and honestly, industry funded clinical trials, they generally are much higher quality and better reported because I think industry knows what the rules are and they don't want to be, they want to not be known as not following the rules. So there is very good work that's done by industry.
Yeah, and it's
Well, it
usually
makes
later
sense.
work though too, right? Because it's not the discovery science; it's kind of the the
Yeah, I
building
think
on
that's true.
discovery
Yeah,
science, right?
and Annals doesn't publish, the discovery science, so I'm
Right.
familiar
Mhm.
with that. But
Yeah.
Yeah, once they've gotten all the way down the product development pipeline, they've invested so much in this new drug or device. Um, they're going to follow as many of the federal regulations and go through the loopholes and get the seal of approval for the best chance of getting approved and being able to take it to market, right? Mm-hmm.
Right. So, Christine, you used a word earlier that the narrative, right? So
Mhm.
there seems to be, my speculation is that it's easy for the MAHA group to roll out different ideas about what causes what because they have narratives, right? They aren't looking at science. They're pushing narratives. And I think you got caught up in one of those earlier this year when RFK Jr. asked you to retract a paper that didn't fit his narrative. Is that
Yes,
is that fair to say?
that is fair to say.
And so I had a question for you. This is just kind of my burning question, my silly I've worked at journals before question, which is how did they contact you about that?
So RFK or his staff did not contact us about that. So the way that I found out about it was that our communications people became aware of the thing on the article that he had supposedly written on TS News. And the reason that they became aware of it is there was a reporter who would not identify who she was writing for. I think she had a Substack who wanted to interview me about that. And
Okay.
so, talking with our communications people, we decided that it was not really worth being interviewed by this particular reporter that we didn't know anything about. We didn't know who she worked for.
Right.
But then soon what happened after that, so RFK never approached the journal. Annals has another thing that I'm proud of at the journal is that we have a commenting feature that accompanies every article. So people can post comments. They have to be within, they can't be thousands of words long, but post comments. We review those within 48 hours. And if they're not using foul language and they're not personal attacks on the authors, we post that comment so that other readers can see it. The authors and the editors can respond if we think there needs to be a response. 6 weeks after the article appears in a dated print issue, our letters editor goes over the correspondence and selects things that are going to be published as a letter to the editor. Um,
Hmm.
and we let authors know when a comment is posted and encourage them. If we're publishing it as a letter, we say you really need to respond. If it's a comment, we strongly encourage them to respond. So RFK could have posted a comment. He didn't. But soon after that TS News article appeared, I got a barrage of emails. So again, not posts, comments on the article, but a barrage of emails, and a lot of them were identical, and a lot of them were so sloppy that people did not insert their signature. So they were signed by insert your name here. So after about,
That's
responding to
cute.
100 of these, I was getting a little passive aggressive, and I said, "Dear, insert your signature here. If if you would like to post your thoughts on the Annals website, and if you want a response from the editors or the authors, you need to post it there. I'm not going to be responding to your email." And so there were some of these people chose to post that on the website. So, and we're also calling for retraction. So the RFK never directly approached the journal to ask for retraction, but a lot of his followers did. And we were
Hmm.
aware that he wanted us to retract it. But once those comments were posted, we had the authors reply to them and the editors reply to them. And we explained why the issues that RFK raised were not issues that warranted retracting the work.
Yeah. That's
Just the
interesting because
idea,
I
yeah, but I just have to pause. Just the notion that um, a retraction is a common term now in the public sphere around scientific information is so bizarre.
Yeah.
That's
Wait till they get hold of expression of concern. Oh my gosh, it's going to be a nonstop. But the thing that strikes me about that is, again, it points out that he's not a peer. He's not a collaborator. He's not somebody who, I mean, it's inappropriate anyhow for him to say anything about, have an opinion about whether an independent journal should or shouldn't take a look at the science that it's validated and published. That's something the independent journal can take care of on its own. Thank you very much. And the experts who work so hard on it. But then for him to not even, I'm sorry, man up enough to contact anyone directly. I mean, to me, that's really telling. That's just, these guys are just bullies. And
well, I do.
That's how a bully acts, right?
Yeah. I mean,
That's
I really
the scaredy
do.
cat bully.
I really do wonder whether RFK himself actually read all, 3,000 words of that article and the material in the supplement. But, he was throwing around, fancy epidemiology terms. So somebody read it and.
Yeah, it seems like they have enough people in that camp now that have been part of the mainstream medicine. I don't know if that's a good word to say. They know enough to be dangerous. They know what they're doing. Who are these people? Do you know much about the folks in the senior administration or in those circles?
Yeah, I mean, I know we've published work from some of them. We have some of our editors are at the same institutions as Jay Bhattacharya and Vinay Prasad. So I know them in that way. And they are people with, valid credentials who have, done work, meaningful work in the past. But they are contrarians in a sense, like, if the elite medical journal community says it's black, they're going to say it's white, and vice versa. But they are smart people.
And historically, that kind of contrarian counterpoint, these discussions would take place within the context of a journal or a community that is the platform for
and that
having these discussions.
That controversy is important because it's how science, that those discussions are important because it's how science progresses. But what worries me is when there is valid science that's countering that opinion, and it's just like they just wants to be disappeared. But so those.
So are you hearing from your membership? What's the temperature like for your audience, the folks that you work for?
One thing that I was really grateful for is that the ACP, they couldn't have told me, to retract the article. That would have been, a whole editorial independence scene, and we would have had the Journal Oversight Committee in on that. So they couldn't do that. But they could have said, don't talk to so many reporters. Let's try to, don't retract the article, but, just post your response in the journal and don't talk to Reuters and the BBC and the Philadelphia Inquirer. They did not. They were all for making this, public that they did that. So I am very grateful to the organization for not thinking, oh, we just want to stay under the radar on this one. So I feel really supported by the organization. And, there are undoubtedly ACP members who are MAHA supporters and stuff. I didn't hear from them. I got huge amounts of kudos for doing my job, basically. And the other thing is, I also received like there's a stack on my desk of postcards from people in the general public, mostly from the Philadelphia area, who read an article in the Philadelphia Inquirer saying, thank you so much for standing up for science. So that's been really grateful. I haven't, luckily, knock on wood, I haven't received any death threats or anything that could happen. But
I hope it doesn't, but
That's
that's great. I think there's much more goodwill toward science, because I think most people understand how much benefit they get from the publication of good scientific results and the care that their physicians give them. And that link with physicians is one thing that I think has been very smartly operationalized in the public messaging, where people are saying, well, okay, so Robert F. Kennedy and the MAHA and, HHS said this. Why don't you talk to your physician about it? And because there's a trust relationship there that is really strong in most instances, I think. So I think that's great.
yeah, unfortunately, some of the changes that are going to evolve over time will make it so that there are fewer of us who have a personal physician or have
Yeah.
access to a personal physician, which is sad. But it does, it does pretty interesting conversations with patients these days who are.
Yeah, what's that like?
It's interesting. And much more time, I think, these days has to be spent sort of debunking information that the patient comes in with in a respectful way. And that's time that could, because time is short in clinical visits. It would be much better if we could spend that time kind of with good advice about evidence-based things that people can do to maximize their health, rather than be assuring them that they are, if they get an mRNA COVID vaccine, it's not going to alter their genome.
Right. Or just even observing them in a conversational way. I mean, I think that a lot of savvy clinicians get a lot from just watching a patient relax into a conversation, and then where do they take it, right?
And I'm glad I'm not an OBGYN, because the Tylenol discussions are going to be, be really interesting. I had to fess up to my daughter that I did take Tylenol when I was pregnant with her, and she said maybe that's the cause of all my problems. But my doctors, I was critically ill with meningoencephalitis, and I had 104 temperature, and my doctors thought that maybe getting rid of that fever and the subsequent seizures and preterm labor, on balance, give me the time. So,
wow. Yeah.
Well, that the ability to talk to patients about evidence-based information, the time windows that you have are getting smaller, but the amount of information that they're coming into with is just growing and growing and growing. And particularly with the public-facing use of AI to go through all this literature and then turn it into a soup and then call it evidence. And that's one of the things that I think has been really interesting to follow some of the trends in what some of the, particularly in science, but also in medicine, this idea of jumping ahead and making, putting AI on top of content that's coming from lots of different sources, and then saying that it adds up to an answer is really concerning. Kent and I did an experiment the other day where I just put two terms into one of these new AI open evidence, platforms. And it gave me something that looked like an up-to-date topic or a Dynametics topic. But I didn't even ask it a question. I just put two terms in it, and it gave me a result that it maybe thought I might be interested in, and then it referenced a whole bunch of journal articles that were from all four corners of the globe,
Right.
and so
Right, and
it's
all different levels of
yeah,
editorial quality,
yeah.
we would
And
assume
so
based
there's
on our knowledge. So
Yeah, and so there's this notion that higher quality journal content that goes into some of these systems is going to improve, kind of rise the, what is it? Rising tides float all boats,
right.
bring it up. Um, but I just wanted to ask you, what do you think about using journal content to kind of skip a few steps to clinical question answering?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there are very few single journal articles that tell you what to do. I mean,
Right.
I mean,
That's their point.
and I think, I worry about, so full disclosure, ACP has a relationship with Dynametics. I'm much more comfortable using, they have an AI search in Dynametics, but it's a walled garden. So that search, when you put a query in there, and this is for clinicians, not for the general public, when you put a query in there, it is giving an answer that is only based on information that's been reviewed by Dynametics and thought to be valid and put in there. So it's not, if you're asking a question about hypertension and treating hypertension with dark chocolate, it's not, pulling in ads from a Swiss chocolate company, which is a real case in the search that I did.
Oh,
So
no.
if the information is being filtered and it's searching on quality information, AI may be a really powerful tool in synthesizing that information and giving an answer relatively quickly when you're kind of in the room with the patient and need an answer, want an answer quickly. I worry some about point of care resources that are just, they may be elevating stuff from particular journals, but they're really going out to everything there. So it's sort of the unfiltered information. And you can't, now a Google search is an AI search now. So, and I think journals are seeing, Annals is seeing a drop in our web traffic, and our peer journals, even ones that are higher profile than us, are also seeing that. And that's because people get the Google answer, and the journal article is way down on the screen, maybe on the second page, and they're not clicking on the journal. And they're gives you what you need and you go on. So they may not even be digging down to know where that answer is coming from. But we do think that that's one of the reasons why the web traffic of many journals is decreasing.
Yeah, that's happening across the web. Yeah, absolutely.
But it's interesting that I think both the peer review Congress that I was recently at and the Guidelines International Network meeting, there are lots of discussions about artificial intelligence, and there are sort of two camps of people, one that think it's going to make things much better and people who are worried about it. I think the truth is like in the middle somewhere. I think we have to figure out how can it help with improving what we're doing, whether it's peer review or it's answering clinical questions, how to best use it as a tool. But I think what people don't understand is that if there isn't good science, that AI is pulling from, it's not, it's not gonna help us very, very much.
Well, it could actually hurt more because the AI is going to try to make good recommendations out of bad science.
Yeah.
Right.
And without the filters of all the different filters that go in from, and when a manuscript is first submitted, to your journal, to all the work that you do to get it ready for publication and certification, and then all the way into having that some of the information be part of a record in a system like Dynametics. That's a lot of human intelligence
Yeah.
that goes through all that.
Yeah, and I think your example, Joy, is a good one where you put in just a couple of words and it shot out something in a format that looks authoritative.
Yes.
And a lot of people can be misled by a format like that to think that there's some sort of, you know, authority behind the answer that doesn't actually exist. It's an inference engine of statistical inference around the occurrence of words, and then shoved into a format that is meant to mimic something that they might get out of like Dynametics or Up to Date or another resource. And so I think understanding all of the different tricks at work in generating these things is really, it's what I've seen a lot of people start to unpack. It's like, okay, how is this actually happening? What are the design and product choices that are being made on you know, the query section, on the processing section, on the output section? What kind of compromises are being made to load balance these high, you know, demand servers and energy intensive servers and things like that. So it's just really interesting to watch people start to unpack AI as a tool set and the potential and the risk.
Yeah, we recently published an article where the authors had, I think it was 5 different AI platforms, and they looked at questions that were the most common questions that people search for on Google Health questions. So like, you know, should I wear if I wear sunscreen, will it decrease my chances of skin cancer, and some nutrition related questions. But they were the top, you know, health related search questions. And what these authors showed is how easily each of these systems could be tinkered with so that it was producing clear misinformation that looked like that it had references, and it looked very, very official, but it was very easy to make those tweaks to have that happen. So if you wanted to produce an answer that said that Tylenol was absolutely the single cause of autism, if somebody did a search, they could get that answer.
Yeah.
So it's
Right.
it's pretty scary the way it can be manipulated. I mean, there's there are scary things that can happen even when it's not manipulated, but it's also easy to manipulate. So maybe we have to figure out ways to manipulate it so it's maybe giving better answers. And I think some of that is through the filtering of what goes into the universe that AI is going to be pulling information from.
Yep.
So what do you think, and this is the last question before we get on to wrapping up, but what do you think it's like for young physicians starting out today? We were talking with, the last couple of weeks, we've talked to 3 different university professors about their experiences with their students and the ones that are being educated to go out into the workforce. What do you think it's like for a new medical school graduate or a resident or someone who's just starting their own, practice?
Yeah, I think one of the good news things is that there's a lot more attention being paid to work-life balance. So, the days of 120-hour work weeks and 24 or 36-hour shifts, that doesn't happen anymore. So that's the good thing. But I think that, we have discussions about at Jefferson about training the physician of the future. And a lot of that has to do with educating them about how to use tools like AI, how to talk to patients who may distrust the medical establishment. So there are new challenges, and and there's also just an explosion of clinical interventions to both prevent and treat illness. So what people have to know is increasingly broad and intimidating. So I think that there are things that are very different than when I trained, and some of it is good. I think the more attention on work-life balance, and that probably not at the top of your game if you've been working for 36 hours, but there are other challenges.
Mhm. And so the role that the ACP plays as the organization dedicated to educating and supporting American physicians, as you know, you're not going to run out of a job anytime soon.
No, I don't think so. And, you know, a lot of, like I said, a lot of the advocacy work that the ACP does is to make sure that, you know, to advocate so that physicians, there aren't gag rules and they can talk to their physicians about gender disparity and reproductive health and other, you know, topics that are currently politically taboo, and to advocate for, you know, healthcare coverage so that you know, one of the most frustrating things about being a physician is when you have a patient, you know what the evidence says you should be doing for them, but they don't have any way to pay for it. So you're talking, you know, what I hate is when I'm teaching residents and I'm saying, okay, if she had insurance, we would be getting these tests and we would be prescribing these drugs, but she doesn't have insurance. So these are the tests that will kind of postpone, and we're going to see which drug she can get for $4 at Walmart. That may not be
Mhm.
optimal drugs. And those it's really frustrating to have to, you know, make those decisions when you're taking care of a patient. But
Mhm.
they're practical decisions, because
Mhm.
if you prescribe the expensive tests and expensive medication, that patient's going to get no
Yeah.
care.
Right. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. There's a big economic aspect of medical care in the US, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
there's a lot more cognitive overload on doctors on many different fronts now than there used to be.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
there's, you know, people have to work, there are metal detectors at the doors of hospitals and stuff that,
Like it
Wow.
used to be too. Yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, Christine, thank you so much. This has been awesome. Um, I think we'd like to thank you for spending some time talking with us about some really important and serious topics. And if you've got a couple more minutes, we'd love to talk to you about things that aren't quite so serious. Would you like
okay.
to share a discovery of the week?
Well, I was thinking about the discovery of the week, and Ken did sort of, he let it out of the bag a little while ago, because when my colleagues and I were talking about this review article on autism, we discovered a couple of things. So Ken already mentioned that the lead author uh, was an expert witness in a case that was taken to federal court in New York City in 2023. That
Mhm.
case, the expert testimony, the judge threw out that expert testimony because of the thought that it was not scientifically valid, and that Dr. Beccarelli was cherry picking data. So that
Mhm.
expert testimony was thrown out. We also found out that that expert testimony earned Dr. Beccarelli well over $150,000 in fees for creating that expert testimony. But then we also found out that initially the plaintiffs filed an appeal, and it was going to be discussed October 6th. So very timely release of that article. Um,
Mm.
uh,
Ooh.
I learned this morning that court date was postponed till November, but still, you know, there's kind of curious timing of all of these events. So that was Ken let a little bit of it out of the bag, but
You've got a lot more,
Wow.
though. You've got a lot more. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because Andrea Love mentioned that this is kind of becoming an industry with these open access journals, is that expert witnesses that get, either want to prepare to enter things into the record as if it's official validated science will pre-publish in the OA space, or they'll do it after the fact and, bring it back in if they get
Yeah.
knocked aside by the Dauber rule or something like that. So, yeah, very interesting. So it looks like the game is afoot still.
Yeah. Also, I guess learned this morning that the next drug target for the FDA is mifepristone, the
Oh,
Russian drug.
Of course.
Yeah, so
here we go.
we published some stuff that suggests that it is not dangerous. I'll be talking to our communications people, like, time to resurface this research article.
What a turn of events that you have to even think about publishing things to prove things are still not dangerous.
Yep. Your narrative is faulty because it's wrong.
Well,
Well, so
that's a good discovery. That's a good scoop, and we'll be paying close attention to what happens with that.
I always say I've been doing this for a long time, and just when it gets boring, something happens. It's not boring.
oh yeah, I know the feeling. I know the feeling. Yeah.
All right.
Well, I'm going to do my discovery of the week, which I hope, Christine, you appreciate, which is about that editing matters in everything, including film. So last night I had to repair a broken speaker wire on our surround sound system. So there you go. That's my background. And what the DVD or the Blu-ray that was in the machine was, my son had rewatched Aliens, the sequel to Alien. And so I like, oh, I'll watch it. That's kind of not a great baseball game on tonight, so I'll watch it. So I watched it, and it was the director's cut, which adds a lot of flab that the theatrical release cut out. And it was not as good a movie because the editing was not as tight. And, though the third act was still incredible. The lines like, game over, man, still worked great. But it reminded me of Star Wars: The Phantom Menace and how bad a movie that was, and then how a film editor secretly, and I still don't know that they've identified who it was, released something called Star Wars: The Phantom Edit. And if you watch that, which is, I think you can still get online, but I have a copy stored away if you want it. It's actually a really good movie when you cut out most of Jar Jar and a lot of headdress stuff by Natalie Portman walking around in her headdresses and stuff like that. But it's actually a really tight movie then. And it just reminds me that, editing things down doesn't always hurt them. In fact, a lot of times it improves them. And I thought you might appreciate that.
When people ask me what my superpower is, I tell them that my superpower is I can shorten any written piece of work by 10%, which is a skill I learned from one of my mentors, Frank Davidoff, who was a previous editor of the journal.
Yeah.
But it really, I think even when I argue with authors that no, these words are all really important, I think making things shorter and editing them, because editing usually involves more cutting things out than putting things in. It does make it better.
Yeah, and movies too. So that was my discovery of the week, as a reminder that tight movies are great.
Well, I think mine can fit on the same theme as well. So my discovery of the week is the new Netflix show called Black Rabbit. And it's starring Jason Bateman and Jude Law as two brothers in New York who run a hip restaurant, but then there's a lot of crime and other stuff going on with it. But it really hits home because the characters are around, I think they're in their early 50s. And then one of the references in their backstory is that they were in a 90s a grunge band.
And Joy's like, okay, you got 2 out of 3 here.
I'm like, okay, yeah. But there are a lot of themes in the show that we've seen in other restaurant movies and crime movies and TV shows and things like that. But the way that they've put it all together, and Laura Linney is one of the directors and credited.
Oh, she's amazing.
So
Yeah.
It's a good show. There's a lot going on to keep up with. I wouldn't recommend watching more than two in a row.
Well, that's good because I just finished binge watching Mayor of Easttown, which
oh yeah,
and so I'm looking for something else.
yeah.
There you go.
It's in. I would say it's in that category. Yeah, it's super well done. And synthesized. There's nothing extra.
Nice.
All right. Well, Christine, thank you so much. It was wonderful to take the time for you to take the time to catch up with us and to fill us in on what it's like to be you and what the ACP is doing to continue to support their members and their stakeholders and to get a little more insight on kind of what it looks like from your perspective. So
Yeah,
thank you
kudos to
so
everybody
much.
there. Really kudos to
Yeah.
everybody there
Well,
at the
thank you for
Journal
that
and at ACP.
opportunity. It's been
Mhm.
really fun talking with both of you, and I hope, please, if you see anything weird that Annals is doing, let me know. I appreciate feedback, particularly negative feedback from people that I trust. But it
You'll be the first to know.
it was really
Yeah.
it was really fun reconnecting with both of you and talking with you. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks,
All
Christine.
right. Thanks. Bye.
All right, that was fantastic. So we're going to post it as soon as possible, I think would be the smart thing to do. And we're probably going to take a break next week. We'll see. We're both traveling for business, so we'll see whether we are able to eke out an episode or not.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll do an emergency pod from the road.
That's right. That's right. We're here in the airport lounge.
You never know what we're
The
going to
HUD,
need to talk about when and where.
it'll be known as the Hudson News episode. It'll be awesome. But anyhow, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for our friends at Provoke the Truth for the music, as always. And let us know what you think. You can reach us at disruptedscience@gmail.com. And we will see you again soon. Hope you enjoyed the episode.